Hey everyone, I'm Caroline Rena, and welcome back to the Ride of My Life podcast. And today I've got Sherrie Dunlevy again back on the podcast because we do similar work in grief, and I've been watching her since the last time I actually did an interview with you. I think it's been over a year now. I don't even know when the last time it was. And I really appreciate the work you're doing. And we were just talking and kind of collaborating ideas and that sort of thing. And I wanted to bring her back on so we can talk about a few things in connection with some of the things that I've been sharing about grief. And I just wanted to say welcome, Sherrie. Welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And also, if you could just give an update of what you're doing, what you do, what's going on, that sort of thing, and then we can get started on that. A little bio.
Well, I guess I'll start at the very beginning. My background is in television and radio. I was a television news anchor and a radio talk show host for years. Started my family, and my second son, Brandon, died shortly after birth. Mm-hmm. And that totally changed my life. It did so much to change me, but the healing from my grief did even more. Mm. But the problem is that didn't happen until 13 years after he died. So I hired a grief coach and realized I thought it was just as good as it got, like, this is how I'm going to live my life. I'm just going to exist and survive. And then once I knew that grief coaches even existed and I hired one, I realized that I can be living and thriving. And that's what I've been doing in the last 10 years. And because of that, I don't want it to take anyone any longer than it needs to be if this is what they're choosing. I was looking to heal. I just didn't know that it was possible. Mm-hmm. And so since that time, I have formed the Graduating Grief Movement. And I wrote a book called How Can I Help? I have the host of the Graduating Grief Living and Loving Life After Loss podcast. And I have the Graduating Grief Community, Positive Grief Community on Facebook. And I created something called the Graduating Grief Academy, where the purpose is to meet grievers where they are, right, and move them always in the direction of hope and healing, whatever that is for them. So that's a nutshell.
That's a nutshell. And you know what? That is why I have been so focused on what you're doing, because it's important that people understand, I use the word what grief really is and what it's not, and then where it can take you. And you're doing the part where it can take you. And that's what I've been working on myself, but in a different way. Mine is more in the channeling and healing and kind of metaphysically way of doing it. And but I do other things, and I'm learning a lot from you. So that's why I wanted to get this on here. So what I wanted to do was start off with, I had mentioned the whole thing about, and this just bothers me because most people don't really understand or know what it is, but it's becoming more and more available to people about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of grief, but they're not really the 5 stages of grief. Would you like to explain what that's all about?
Well, there are no stages of grief as far as I believe. Because that makes you think that you ascend to a level. Mm-hmm. Oh, anger. Oh, check that off my list. And then you're like, wait a minute, the anger came back. I
Right.
thought I was done with anger, the bargaining, the denial. Those were actually created when she was working with dying people.
Yes.
And those were the stages that she saw them going through in the acceptance and the hearing the news that their life would soon be ending, and the different stages that she witnessed people going through because they were grieving their mortality.
Right.
There's a difference. We are grieving someone who's already died. Right. So those stages don't always, like you can't bargain because they're not coming back. You can't bargain. Right. So there are just certain things that, yes, there are some commonalities in it. There's anger and there's acceptance and, there's a lot of commonalities, but they're not stages that lead you to somewhere.
Right.
That's why I like to say there's no rule book to grieving. But personally, I've created some guidelines. And I think like we can follow those guidelines, and I find these much more helpful.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And something else too, I wanted to hear what you had to say about this also. It's not just grieving death, but there's so many different kinds of losses in our life, like things that never happened that we wanted to, divorce, losing children, in my case, through parental alienation, and grieving a child that is still alive, and not being able to talk to them. What about this? Obviously doesn't help in that situation either, because as I was going through my process, I recognized that none of those, because I was, roped into that, I've got to do it this, and I got to go through this next, and I'm like, this isn't working. It's not working for me. And
Well,
that's
and especially in a divorce or child alienation, like it's two parties. And you can only control one party, right? So you can't even control what the other party is doing or saying or thinking or being or how they're treating you or not treating you. So like none of that works. It doesn't.
It's so important for us to respond to these feelings and emotions of grief that are coming up in order to heal that stuff. And in our society, and this kind of goes into what grief really is that we were taught, cover up, it's okay, honey, don't cry, when we're little children, don't cry, here, let me give you a cookie or something, and it's like, you have to allow a child to grieve. And then you, as an adult, you'll know how to do that, but we aren't taught that. We're taught to cover and stuff and hide, and then we don't know what's happening to us in later in life. Can you kind of expand on that?
Well, it's grief is the emotion surrounding what we're feeling when we lose someone or something that we love. And it's the emotion. And so you have to feel if you want to heal. And so not honoring those feelings, stuffing them down, or as I used to call it, I put my grief on the back burner because I was raising a 3-year-old child. I did not want his earliest memories of his mother being that of her always crying for the brother that died when she had a 3-year-old son alive right there. So I would just like, well, this isn't a good time. This isn't a good time. Right. And I never made the time. And finally, then I just became kind of numb to it. And when you become numb to it, it's back there and it's always with you. But I think that it comes out in different ways. It comes out when you're in traffic. It comes out when someone's rude to you in public. I remember one time I was at the grocery store and I was in the 12 items or less, and the lady said, "You have 13 items." And I started crying.
Wow. Yeah.
Because she was mean to me. It wasn't, honestly, like, no big deal, right? But that was my grief coming out.
Right. And yeah,
because I wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't dealing with it.
Right, exactly. And the thing is that when we have these emotions that get stacked on top of each other, especially when there's more things that happen in our life.
Yeah. And the cart topples over at some point.
It's either that or it crashes or blows up, whatever, but it's
You
like it
sneeze in
goes.
your sleep and your disc explodes like
Yeah.
mine did.
Yeah. And the thing is that these emotions, the energy of these emotions gets stuck in our nervous system. So it's similar to the stress response. It's all in there. So it all reacts together, mind, body, spirit, you know, emotions and mentally and all of it.
Right.
And it's like,
So that's another thing I want to address is that grief is a full body experience. And
yeah,
so it's not just emotion. And if we aren't feeling those emotions, our body will harbor it and be host to it.
Mhm.
And we'll never forget it until we deal with it. Um, it's mind, it's soul, it's body. It's all encompassing. It's holistic, so to speak. And we need
that's the
to,
direction of what the healing holistic part of us
right.
is.
So there's a lot of things that you can do to help move it through you. Like there's grief yoga. Although I've never participated in grief yoga, I've talked with many people who think that it's like an amazing modality to help move it out. I'm one that walks it out.
Yeah.
I just walk it out, move it out. You've got to move it out, or creative release.
Which is what I do, the journaling and the writing and that sort of thing. Yeah. Yep.
All of this helps you pay attention to it. Give it the due, give it the time that it deserves. It's there for a reason. If grief wasn't important, we wouldn't experience it. We wouldn't feel it.
Well,
right.
Yeah.
Supposed to learn from it. I have a podcast episode, "Is Grief My Greatest Teacher?" And it has been my greatest teacher about living. And you see my shirt that says joyful. That's in the Graduating Grief Academy. The senior level is Journey to Joy, where you unabashedly experience joy. Go and do things for the mere fact of experiencing joy, not feeling guilty about it, not feeling doubtful, not being afraid of it. We're not meant to live in the land of grief the rest of our life. And we're not meant to carry this heavy burden of grief the rest of our life either. And see, no one ever told me that, especially after you lose a child. They tell you, well, on the hierarchy of grief, that's the heaviest, that's the worst. And you'll never recover. And just try going into a Facebook group of grief. It's like crabs in a bucket. Everybody pouring pain, feeding pain, feeding pain, feeding pain. And if you're new to grief and you go in there, you feel like you're drowning and you'll never get out. And that's why I had to create something different.
Yeah.
I had to create something different.
It's the same with the parental alienation groups, exactly, with everybody's telling their story over and over and over and over again, and they're carrying it, they're staying stuck in it, they're not shifting anything. And what I've found most recently, which was one of the reasons I reached out to you, was because a few weeks ago I started going through some more grief. And this usually happens at this time of year. It seems even more so than other times of year, at least in my world.
There's a lot of triggers.
There are plenty, especially in December, from losses and deaths and you name it, everything is there, and Christmas and the holidays, all the holidays. And I started grieving over one person, and then all of a sudden, which was not all of a sudden, but it started all coming up, all of the grief that I still had not yet touched. And I've done a lot of grief work. And here it comes all over again. And I'm walking through 2.5 weeks worth of this grief that's coming up. And some of it, I didn't even know what it was, but I just sat with it and I allowed it to come up. And I had to learn how to do that because we're not taught that. I think that it would help us to be taught how to help ourselves through grief, and then how to help other people through grief, instead of shutting them down or telling them everything's going to be okay. Or in your case, I know you've worked through this already, so I'm going to say it, but, oh, sure, you can have more children. Well, okay. And I still need to grieve what's happened. It doesn't mean that this is going to go away until I look at it or sit with it, So the piece about allowing it and releasing it and letting that stuff go is important, to pay attention when these emotions are coming up. And what about learning how to support other people in grief? What do you suggest on that?
Well, I was in a support group after I lost my son, Brandon, and it was a lovely group of people. Um, the issue I had with it was that there was no starting point, there was no ending point. So why is that important? Because just as you're starting to make headway and feel good, a whole new group of grievers come in with their fresh pain
Mm-hmm.
and not and so you're trying to, yes, pay it forward by helping them, but you can't help but absorb that
Mm-hmm.
that pain. Um, and then you're perpetually telling your story every week. And so the problem that I had is that there were times where most times towards the end, I was feeling really good, really like little more like myself again,
Mm-hmm.
and would go into this meeting and then conjure up all of this stuff and be right back where I started, and
Yeah.
then have to start the process again of moving through that. And so I told my husband I was feeling worse after I left than when I walked in, when I told him, I feel like I need to graduate. That's where graduating grief comes from. I needed to
Okay.
graduate from that pain and suffering, and I needed to learn how to step back into my life. How am I going to live my life now? How am I going to deal with the guilt? How am I going to deal with other people's opinions? How am I going to deal with what I want? Because grief is also a great revealer of what's important and what's not important in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Who's important and who's not important? Who gets a say, who doesn't get a say? And we need help with that. And so that's what I do. So I have a self-guided grief course that just helps people understand what's happening, what's going on, and some basic skills on how to process that emotion. But the real get down and dirty and get to the root of the grief, it's called My Healing Journey, and it's grief completion, life reorganization, and that takes place in a group setting, limited 10 people, and up to 10 people, and it happens in 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
8 weeks.
So it
So
has
we
an ending.
get together and we graduate together,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
There is an ending point,
Yes.
and you will recover from the grieving,
Mm-hmm.
and you will start learning how to set up your life in a way that works for you now because of what happened, because you have this new life that none of us asked for, but we have to learn how to live it, and we have to design it, and we have to reorganize some things to make it work for us now, because it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. Life is different now.
Well,
And
how can you explain to people how to recognize that it's okay to do? Like some people are either afraid of it because they don't understand it, or they don't think that, oh well, I'm not going to be able to, go on this healing journey and then graduate. Really? Are you kidding me? I feel like crap right now. So that's not in my headspace. I don't understand that. How would you? Because
you're not ready.
I want
Then you're
people to know that they're going to get there, that it is possible, that it is possible to live your life in an incredible way.
well, because I'm living proof, number one, and on my podcast, in past episodes, I have tons of people who are living proof. So if it's possible for us, it's possible for anyone, but you have to choose it. You
Yes.
have to choose it. It doesn't just magically happen. You can't, and so this is where, a lot of people say, oh, Sherrie, I need you to call my mom. She's just stuck in her grief and she won't this and she won't that. And I'm like, here's my number. When she's ready, she can call me, but I'm not going to call
There's
her.
a part, I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to throw this in. There's a part of the choice. There's the choice, and then there's the persistence. You want it bad enough. You want your life. I mean, this is the shot you have in this lifetime for those of you who believe in other lives, but this is it. So do you want to live it miserable and sad and angry and, depressed and things going wrong in your life, or do you want to live in joy?
Right. Yeah. And you have to choose it. And so, you have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired.
I use that. Yep. Yeah.
Right? And that's what it was. And I didn't know that it was possible for me until someone told me it was possible. So that's my first job as an inspirationista, is to let people know it's possible.
It is.
If you choose it, I can guide you.
Yes.
I can guide you. I'm not a be all end all. It is a process. I am not the magic person. Like, people will say, you saved my life. And I say,
No,
no,
you did.
you did the work. I was your guide. The
Mhm.
process, you followed the process, you committed fully to this. And this is why you feel like you have your life back. And that's why I felt like I have my life back. It is a commitment. It is hard work in the way that I make you go there. You have to go there. And if you're not willing to go there, then it's not going to work for you.
Mhm.
I mean, and I don't mean to sound callous. I don't mean to sound mean, but I mean to sound
It's tough love.
direct enough to tell you what you need to hear, instead
Yes.
of what everybody else is telling you because they think you want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're even afraid of it. So they don't know.
Right. So it is possible. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be sad again, or another wave of grief isn't going to come over you. But the difference is that you're strong enough to withstand that wave of
Yes.
grief.
100%. That's why I told you
It's not going to bowl you over and have you tumbling and gasping for air and then having to lay in bed for 3 days. Right.
Yes.
Not going to, you have built the strength and created the courage and the confidence now.
Yes.
I can do this. I can live this. My life is worth living. It means something.
Yes.
It matters. And I can do something fabulous with it.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what I wanted. Yeah. I want people to hear this information, because you don't have to stay stuck in it. There's different people out there like Sherrie, and Sherrie has her course, her academy. She's got all the Facebook groups, all of these things. And I'm starting out with a journaling to walk through grief at this point. And it's for me, it's always journaling has always been something that has guided and helped and cleared. It gets things out of my head. It gets things out of me so I can work through it. And just to choose to do something like this, like Sherrie was saying, is huge, huge. So Sherrie, do you have anything else left that you want to make sure you get out there before we close out?
Well, I still have a few spaces available. I'm starting a virtual My Healing Journey group on January 10th. It's Tuesday, January 10th is when we start. We'll be finished by the end of February. I mean, this literally can change your life. It can give you your life back. Right? Why wouldn't you choose that? So what I tell people is you have to believe it's possible. Mm-hmm. You have to decide to take action. You have to choose to participate in your healing. And then you have to commit to doing the challenging work that's necessary.
Right. And I'd like to add, my mantra that I've used for probably the last 6 years has been: be willing, be courageous, be free. And that to me is what this is about: working through, choosing to work through, working through, and coming out on the other side in a totally different place than you even expected, possibly, so just huge. So yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm glad you and you validated a lot of the things that I've been thinking and wanting to put out there and everything. So I appreciate that, Sherrie, very much. And let's see what comes out of this. I don't know, maybe there's more we can talk about and share with people, so they can reach out and take your course. I will be putting her link to this class that's coming up in January on the description of the podcast. And yeah, so please take a look into your soul and decide what you want, because you've got support here, and you've got options, and you can become joyful. So yep. So
find your joy again, right?
Yes, exactly. So thank you again, Sherrie. And thank you all for being here on the Ride of My Life podcast. And I guess that's about it. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. More to come. Peace.